Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do the first kill count on here, and we're starting with Ghoulies 2 from 1988. Ghoulies 2 was a film directed by Albert Band, who was the father of Charles Band, who was the owner of Full Moon. Full Moon made movies like Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, Subspecies, and a lot of other garbage. The success of the first Ghoulies, making over $1 million at the box office, a sequel wasn't demanded. However, 3 years later, they decided to go on and make a sequel in the form of Ghoulies 2. It wouldn't nearly get as much money as the first film. However, it became my favorite in the franchise for multiple reasons. The story revolves around our main character, Larry, who works at a carnival at an attraction called the Satan's Den alongside his Uncle Ned, and when the Ghoulies are brought back to life, I guess, they hitch a ride on the truck that Larry and Ned ride in, and end up in the Satan's Den, where they cause destruction amongst the carnival and kill a lot of people. But just how many people? Let's find out. Get to the kills. The movie opens on an open road where we meet our main character Larry and his Uncle Ned, who's played by Royal Dano, who for most horror fans will know for his role as Gene Green from Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Their temp light starts to flash, which forces them to stop at a mechanic shop. We then cut to a title card, and then cut to a man running out of a forest away from 3 cult members, which is the only connection besides the Ghoulies himself to the first movie. The priest runs to the mechanic shop and locks himself inside, managing to lose the cult members. He then walks over and sees a very dangerously, perfectly open vat of acid. Like, seriously, who designed this mechanic shop? The Reanimator? The priest begins some sort of chant and then drops the sack he's holding into the vat of acid. However, before he could finish, suddenly the flying ghoulie busts in through the window and rams into him, causing him to fall backwards into the acid for our first kill of the movie. Coincidentally, both Larry and Ned arrive at the same mechanic shop. Larry hits inside for some gas to find that nobody's in there, and somehow doesn't hear the flying ghoulie right above him. With no one in there, Larry heads back outside to help Ned out, and the ghoulies arise outside from the acid. The fish ghoulie, the cat ghoulie, the rat ghoulie, and the toad ghoulie. And there's the 5 ghoulies for the film. Ned locks up the truck, but he actually forgets to lock it. The ghoulies peek outside to see that the coast is clear, and then see the Satan's Den truck. They walk over to it, climb inside, and hitch a free ride to the carnival. The next morning at the carnival, we meet another main character, Nigel. I'm sorry, Sir Nigel. Then this asshole pulls up like he owns the place. Oh, he does own the place. Shit. This is Phil, and he is a dick. He tells Sir Nigel to assemble everyone for a little conference, I guess. In Satan's Den, Ned is having a little nap on a chair, I guess. Nigel stops by to give him coffee and lets him know about the conference, and they head outside. Meanwhile, in another room of Satan's Den, the ghoulies are messing around with all the equipment in there, and some things in that room will come to key use later. Outside, everyone assembles for the meeting, and Phil lets them all know that if their attraction does not make enough money by the end of the week, that they gotta get their stuff and get the hell out of here. Phil wants to replace the Satan's Den with some sort of woman mud wrestling thing, which is disgusting. It turns out Ned used to be some sort of magician named Foulstall or something, and Larry tries to persuade him to back and be the new performance to get them to make money. The return of Foulstall. However, Ned doesn't really like that idea. Back outside, a girl named Patty decides she's gonna quit the job because it's a dump, I guess. She drops her cat and thinks it somehow made it all the way to the Satan's Den. I mean, seriously, how the hell would it get there in 5 seconds? Regardless, she heads inside and hears a cat meowing. However, the audience figures out that it's actually the cat ghoulie making those noises. The cat ghoulie grabs a scalpel and hides inside a coffin. When Patty reaches her hand in, the cat ghoulie attacks her and cuts up her hand with the scalpel. The toad ghoulie then trips her and holds her in place as the rat ghoulie and fish ghoulie come down and start biting into her hands. Then it gets real nasty when the toad, rat, and fish ghoulie begin to really gore into Patty's limbs. The cat ghoulie then climbs on top of Patty, and the fish ghoulie comes up and bites Patty on the cheek. The cat ghoulie then goes nuts and starts screaming before finally killing Patty by swinging the scalpel down and cutting into her face off screen. Back inside Satan's Den, Ned is making a fool of himself where he jokes around pretending to be Foulstall. He goes to pick a rabbit out of his hat but pulls out the fish ghoulie instead and throws him at the wall. The rest of the ghoulies are hanging out in a chest full of accessories, and Ned finally sees the ghoulies. He thinks he's accidentally performed a ritual and summoned them, and gets excited because he could save Satan's Den. And he then runs off to go get Nigel. Ned takes Nigel to where the ghoulies are, however, when they get there, the ghoulies are gone because they're hiding. Ned gets upset and starts throwing stuff, which causes Larry to come in the room and see what's going on. Ned tries to tell Larry that he summoned little demons, but Larry just gets pissed off at him and thinks he's too drunk. So, the 3 leave the room. Meanwhile, in a changing room, these ladies are dressing up and getting ready for the carnival to open, when Phil walks in to talk to this girl named Nicole. Nicole is played by Carrie Remsen, who later the same year would play Maggie in Pumpkinhead. Phil wants to talk to Nicole about some business, but she says she'll be working all night, but he says he'll wait. The carnival eventually opens, and we see a lot of the attractions. A couple of annoying kids walk up to Satan's den. We then meet our traditional group of assholes. The main one is Bobby, alongside his gross girlfriend, and his friend Teddy, who also has a gross girlfriend, and Merler. Larry lets him know that they have to turn their sound off, and after being an asshole about it, he finally agrees to turn it off. For now. The two kids from a second ago start walking around Satan's den and are not amused by literally anything. Meanwhile, in another room, the asshole squad is just walking around looking at everything and having sex on couches. Great. Meanwhile, in another room, like I already said 3 times, Merler's walking around by himself. Forgot to mention, Merler is played by William Butler, who currently is the director of the Baby Oopsie trilogy by Full Moon. Pretty cool guy. The kids are still walking around being sarcastic about everything they see, until they encounter the rat ghoulie, who is chewing on some fake heads. One of them thinks it's just a regular rat and walks up to the rat ghoulie, but the rat ghoulie spits his scream slime at him. It gets the kid so pissed off that he pulls out a shuriken. What the fuck was that doing in his pocket? How long has he had that? Weird. The kid throws it at the rat ghoulie, but he grabs it in his mouth and starts to eat it. I mean, the rat ghoulie probably needs some more iron anyway. The kids think that the rat ghoulie is a part of the attraction, so they get so impressed that they run out to grab a crowd of people to show them. The teenagers are still walking around when they make it to the torture chamber and start to party, and Bobby turns on his boombox again because he doesn't give a shit about rules. While they're partying, the flying ghoulie flies past them and eventually comes down and slashes Bobby's hand. Then the cat ghoulie knocks over Bobby's boombox to the ground and it breaks. Bobby and his girlfriend leave while Teddy and his girlfriend stay behind and start making out. The rat ghoulie returns and starts to spit the same green slime at them, and he eventually sticks them together. Outside, the kids tell a crowd of people about the rats inside the Satan's den, so they all run up to get a ticket. At the same time, Bobby and his girlfriend and Teddy and his girlfriend leave Satan's den. Merler's still walking around inside, but the ghoulies quickly attack him when the cat ghoulie grabs a pocket knife and stabs him in the leg. The ghoulies jump on Merler, eventually forcing him onto the torture table where they chain his arms and legs and eventually start trying to stretch him apart. Finally, the fish ghoulie turns on the pendulum, and as it swings back and forth, it eventually slices deep into Merler's flesh, killing him for the 3rd kill of the movie. Phil walks up to Satan's den and is surprised to see how many customers there are and how much profit is being made. Back inside Satan's den, the customers only want to see the rats and push Nigel out of the way, and Nigel doesn't feel too good about it. Back in the torture chamber, the ghoulies are wrapping up Merler's dead body when the crowd comes in to see the ghoulies. The ghoulies are confused at first, but then they go into the joke that yes, his body's fake, and they start acting like they're a part of the performance. The crowd starts cheering, and the rat and cat ghoulie high-five each other. After the carnival closes, Phil gets to talk with Nicole about business, and it actually is business. He wasn't lying. Nigel offered Phil to stay in his little trailer. However, literally little trailer. Back in Satan's den, Ned is trying to sleep, but he really wants to prove that the ghoulies he saw were real, so he gets out of bed and ventures out to try and find them. When Ned walks into the torture chamber, he finds Merler's blood on the pendulum and knows something is up. Back outside, Larry and Nigel leave Satan's den and they turn off the power, leaving Ned in darkness. They leave, however, Larry sees Nicole and Phil talking to each other, and Larry thinks that they have some sort of relationship now. Phil heads over to Larry and collects the profit from that night, and is surprised to see how much money that was actually made. Suddenly, the cops pull up, and it's Bobby and his girlfriend. They're here to sue Satan's den for Bobby's injury and the fact that Teddy and his girlfriend got stuck together with the slime earlier. Inside Satan's den, Ned is walking around with a light bulb in his hand, is just somehow lighting up, and he opens a coffin to find a mummy. He thinks it's just a regular mummy prop, but eventually sees the blood and matches it with the pendulum earlier, figuring out it's a dead body. Ned turns around to find the rat ghoulie behind him, and still thinking he summoned them, he tries to tell the rat ghoulie that they have to obey him. However, the cat ghoulie doesn't seem to agree, as he grabs the pocket knife from Merler's leg. The flying ghoulie then flies towards Ned and breaks his light bulb. Outside, Phil literally bribes the police officer, like, did nobody see that? Jesus, this guy's a fucking asshole. The cop asks Larry if there's absolutely nobody in Satan's den, and even though he says yes, from the inside, Ned turns the power back on, which raises the suspicion even more. Meanwhile, Ned is scrambling through a chest to find the same spellbook from earlier, and he manages to find it. However, just as he finds the right spellbook, the fish ghoulie attacks him and bites him on the neck. Ned has a scramble with the fish ghoulie before he finally manages to grab him and throw him off. Ned goes to grab the book, but the toad ghoulie bites it, and they have a little game of tug-of-war, but Ned manages to win. Ned looks through the book for the instructions and manages to find them. It tells him to draw a pentagram, so he decides to use his blood to draw it. Once he finishes, he starts chanting. However, the cat ghoulie attacks him and stabs him in the heart, and that's the fourth kill. Wait a minute, why is there no death screen? Ned manages to survive thanks to a deck of cards in his pocket. However, I don't think he's going to survive this next part. The rat ghoulie chews through a wire and breaks it in half and sticks it onto Ned, which electrocutes Ned to death for our fourth kill of the movie. Everyone heads inside Satan's den and they find Ned's dead body. Larry is distraught, however, it's too late. Ned is already dead. Phil, being the asshole he is, he tries to shy it off as just some drunk man having an accident in the night. For a fearful rest in peace, Larry covers Ned's dead body with his magician's cloth. The next morning, Nigel brings Larry some coffee, but Larry is still upset about last night and doesn't want to talk. Inside Satan's den, Nigel's trying to fix a bat prop, but it falls and he gets pretty pissed off about it. Nigel heads over to get his pliers, however, he finds Patty's necklace on the ground and gets suspicious. Nigel finally believes what Ned said when he finally sees the Ghoulies. And I don't think he's a pretty big fan of them. Back outside, Nicole tries to talk to Larry, but Larry doesn't want to talk to her after he saw Phil and her together last night. However, she tells him that it was just business. He apparently offered her some sort of new job where she would do some sort of balancing thing. However, she rejected because of a story. It's revealed that when she was young, her and her brother liked to balance on stuff. However, her brother fell off something and died, so she had a fear of balancing and didn't want to do it ever again, so she didn't suffer the same fate.
Well, that's a sad story, Nicole, but let's make out real quick.
Larry tries to head back in Satan's den, but is being guarded by a cop because Phil has replaced Larry because of the incident that happened last night. Larry tries to persuade Phil to at least let him go in and get his stuff, but Phil declines. However, Larry does not really give a shit. As Larry's collecting his things, he gets suspicious of a chest, and when he walks over and opens it, he finds Nigel hiding in there. Nigel tells Larry that his uncle was right and the Ghoulies really do exist, and even though Larry doesn't believe it at first, Nigel shows Larry the necklace he found from Patty. However, for any more proof, Larry actually sees the Ghoulies for the first time. The fish ghoulie jumps up and starts attacking Larry, and soon the cat and rat ghoulie also join in attacking Larry, and Nigel runs off to get help. Bobby and Teddy return to the Satan's den to get their boombox back. However, Nigel runs out and tries to warn everyone not to go in there, but Bobby just picks up Nigel like a little kid and just throws him out the way. Back inside, Larry is having a hard time fighting off the Ghoulies, but I do know that there is one way to stop the Ghoulies, by not obeying the laws of physics. Somehow, Larry doesn't get fried like his uncle did, and he runs outside to get help from a group of people so they could fight off the Ghoulies. Larry gathers up a group of the performers and heads back to Satan's den to fight off the Ghoulies. Phil tries to stop Larry from getting back into Satan's den, and he gets the cop behind him and tells the cop to shoot Larry if he tries to get through. Larry yells to shoot him then, and he runs past Phil. Thankfully, unlike Phil, the cop is a good person and decides not to shoot Larry. However, Phil just grabs a shotgun and tells him he's fired. Back in Satan's den, there's a crowd of people watching the Ghoulies torture Bobby and Teddy with a guillotine and once again the pendulum. However, they all think it's a part of the act, even though Bobby and Teddy try to warn them. Larry and the squad make it to the torture chamber and get the crowd out of there and prepare to fight with the Ghoulies. Everyone in the room begins to fight with the Ghoulies, and Phil enters to see the Ghoulies for himself. Well, after most of the fight is over, Phil walks in to be once again an asshole, and he wants to keep the Ghoulies in the attraction since it's driving in lots of profit, despite how dangerous they are. Larry is against the idea and tries to take the shotgun from Phil, but it causes Phil to shoot a hole in the wall. Phil falls backwards into an Iron Maiden, and when it opens, it reveals Patty's dead body. The Ghoulies notice the hole in the wall and make an escape, where they head out into the carnival to cause even more massacre. Despite the Ghoulies being out in the carnival now, Phil still wants someone to catch one Ghoulie so he can keep it, and the single most satisfying scene happens. In the place where Nicole is performing, the Toad Ghoulie crawls around the audience and seems to enjoy the performance. Nicole doesn't seem to like all of her fans, though. Larry comes up to the stage and lets Nicole know what's happening. Meanwhile, some of the Ghoulies are playing at a shooting range, and the Rat and Toad Ghoulie are just being straight dicks to the Cat Ghoulie. Elsewhere in the park, the Rat Ghoulie spooks some people when they try and play whack-a-mole. and the cat ghoulie climbs inside a boxing glove and jumps up and manages to knock a man out. Meanwhile, at the clown dunking game, a man manages to dunk the clown in the water. However, the clown suddenly starts to panic as he's attacked by the fish ghoulie, who rips his arm off for our 5th kill of the movie. Meanwhile, at another part of the carnival, at the bumper car section, the toad ghoulie hops on a bumper car and starts to drive around. While on a ride, the fish ghoulie is trying to detach a screw. While back at the bumper cars, this unnamed girl gets attacked by the rat ghoulie in her bumper car, which causes her to fall out of the bumper car. The toad ghoulie then runs over the girl, killing her for the 6th kill of the movie. Meanwhile, the fish ghoulie is still trying to detach the coaster, and when she manages to do it, he kills 2 unnamed people when it sends them flying and crashing into another ride. Meanwhile, Larry and Nicole meet up with Nigel, where Nigel has the idea to use the spellbook that Ned had died with earlier. Meanwhile, Phil is walking around the carnival and seeing all the chaos that's happening and know he's going to get blamed for it. He runs off. Meanwhile, Larry is desperately searching to find the spellbook, and he manages to find it. Meanwhile, back outside, Phil runs off to a bathroom and hides inside. He looks in the mirror and says it's not his fault. However, in a scene that should have happened in the original, the fish ghoulie pops out the toilet. When Phil goes to sit on the toilet, the fish ghoulie kills him by seemingly going up his ass. The trio takes the book outside, and Larry draws a pentagram in the sand. However, before he can start chanting, the flying ghoulie snatches the book from him and drops it on the Ferris wheel. Larry's in no shape to climb from his injuries, and Nicole decides to climb herself to face her fears. Nicole climbs up to the Ferris wheel, and even though she gets attacked by the flying ghoulie, she manages to grab the book and drop it back down to Larry and Nigel. Larry and Nigel get to the ground to prevent the flying ghoulie from snatching it from them again. They start chanting, and the ground begins to shake as magic noises begin to intensify. Suddenly, a giant hand reaches out from the ground and snatches the flying ghoulie from the air. As the giant beast arises from underground, it's revealed to be a giant ghoulie that kind of looks like the fish ghoulie, and its mouth is the flying ghoulie, and the ghoulies will go on the kill count, by the way. The giant ghoulie walks over to the cat ghoulie and snatches him from the shooting range, and also proceeds to eat him for our 2nd ghoulie kill of the movie. The giant ghoulie then walks over and also snatches the toad ghoulie from a popcorn stand and also eats him for the 3rd ghoulie kill of the movie. Finally, the giant ghoulie walks over to the hammer game, and instead of openly eating the rat ghoulie, he instead crushes the rat ghoulie with a hammer, and then proceeds to eat the dead body. Meanwhile, Larry looks through the spellbook to try and find a way to also get rid of the giant ghoulie once he's done eating the others. The giant ghoulie then walks over to the trio and thinks Nigel is another demon because of his size. He's a midget. Larry and Nicole take Nigel to his trailer and they hide inside there. However, the giant ghoulie nearly breaks in, but then Larry thinks of an idea. He takes the demon suit that Nigel was wearing earlier for Satan's Den and hides a Molotov cocktail inside. He sets it outside and the giant ghoulie grabs it and proceeds to eat it. The giant ghoulie stumbles around before getting a big stomachache, and he explodes for the final ghoulie kill of the movie. The next day, Larry and Nicole are heading off together and leaving the carnival. Nigel stays behind and says goodbye to them. And the movie ends with a reveal that the fish ghoulie was not eaten and managed to survive. How many kills did the ghoulies get during their trip to the carnival? Let's find out. Get to the numbers. Oh, look, a perfectly open vat of acid. I wonder what that's doing in here. I should probably move it out of here. Ah! 9 people died in Ghoulies 2. 6 of them being male and 3 of them being female. And there was also 5 ghoulies. Golden Chainsaw for best kill goes to Patty. It got really brutal when the ghoulie started to tear into her flesh like that. And Dull Machete for lamest kill goes to the girl that was run over by the bumper cars. It's just the most boring kill. And that's it. Ghoulies 2 came out in 1988 and is my personal favorite of the franchise. Next time we'll either be looking at Ghoulies 3 or Pumpkinhead, but I'm going to let you all decide that on my community tab. I'm Hardcore Fan, and I'll see you next time. Nine people died in Ghoulies 2, with 6 of them being male and 3 of them being female. Along with that, we had 5 ghoulie kills. Golden Chainsaw for coolest kill goes to Patty. It got really brutal when the ghoulies started ripping through her flesh like that. And Dull Machete for lamest kill goes to the girl that was run over by the bumper car. It's just the most boring of all the kills.